So, in terms of right after you submit, the most critical thing to take care of is the portal. So, for almost every college, as soon as a student submits an application, or within a few days after the student submits an application, they will be invited to set up an admissions portal. And this is just beyond critical because it is where pretty much the rest of the application takes a process takes place, because up until this point, the student has been reaching out and communicating with the admissions office through the application, whether it's the Common App or whatever the application. But once that application is submitted, that's no longer an open channel of communication, and communication takes place almost completely through the portal. There might be some emails, there might be some text, but that's where everything happens. It's also the place where the student can check to see whether or not their application is completed and where everything has been submitted. And this is critical because the only person who is responsible for application completion is the student. It's really not something that anyone else can do for them. Nobody at the school can do it. It's where admissions decisions are going to be reported. It's where financial aid offers and letters and award letters will appear. There are a few schools who don't use portals, but each year more and more are using some version of a portal. The student will receive anytime from a second after they've submitted the application up to a few days later, an email that is saying, "Thank you for your application." The subject line is usually something like that, with login instructions. And I cannot tell you how many students miss these, don't know to look for them. And the other thing is that a lot of times they end up in spam or junk, or if the student is using Gmail, they end up in promotions or updates or forums, those sort of extra inboxes. Another reason it's so critical to do this is that it can be a component of demonstrated interest. That thing that I talk about all the time, which is where the student shows the college how interested they are in them by engaging in various activities. And it's really easy for colleges to track what students are doing electronically, including whether they're logging into their portals, how quickly they set up their portals. Again, I don't, I, with demonstrated interest, I always want to be careful to not be too cynical. They don't have a lot of time to be looking at stuff like that, but if they wanted to, they could actually see whether or not the student logged into the portal and how quickly, and whether they're logging in more than once. Don't go crazy with that. I mean, there are other reasons to check the portal regularly, well, which I'll explain in a minute, and that's really the reason to go in there, but it is a component of demonstrated interest. So kind of to sum up how to interact with the portals, set them up immediately, and then I recommend that students check in about once a week or so. Obviously, then you can catch the trivia questions if that's what they're doing, but just dig around, make sure you haven't missed anything, make sure you aren't being asked for something new. So that is the portals. Now I'm going to shift gears and talk about other things that students can still do after they've submitted applications. So interviews are still going on, not for too much longer. Once we get really kind of deep into, November, December, admissions folks get pretty busy and they aren't doing them anymore. However, there can still be ongoing opportunities for interviews with alums and with what they call usually student ambassadors, who are usually senior students. So those are the three kinds of interviews you can have. You can have one with admissions. Again, those opportunities are kind of going away at this point because those folks are getting busy, but you can also interview with an alumni or with a current student. There are two important reasons for students to do interviews if they want to, if they feel it's a strength for them. The most important thing is it demonstrates interest, right? Because taking the time out of your day doing an interview, which nobody really wants to do, demonstrates interest. The other thing is that it's a really great opportunity to learn more about the school, especially if the student hasn't had the opportunity to visit campus. That person is going to be there to inform the student about the school as much as, or maybe even more than, to actually interview them. So that can be valuable to the student from that perspective. Um, Other things to do post submission. If the student has any important updates, so what might that look like? So that could be a big test score increase. If they have won some kind of significant award or had some really significant extracurricular involvement, um, elected to an important position, or I had a student just get a huge government grant for their community service project, those kinds of things are good to update reps on. And there may or may not be a place to look in the portal because where it says, upload additional materials, you can click into the drop down. And if the drop down is like information update, you can do it there. The other way to do it is just to send a very, very brief, succinct email to the admissions rep. Hey, just writing to report some great news. I was just elected president of the whole school. Just wanted to share and get out because those folks get lots and lots of emails and you want to just make sure that it gets into the file. Of course, if there's a significant grade improvement, the easiest way to have that reported is to ask the high school counselor if they can include it in their letter or send a quick note. But if not, the student can update the rep too and just say, hey, just wanted to let you know, getting the best grades of my life. Here's my GPA right now, or whatever. Um, Another thing that students can continue doing after they've clicked submit is to continue with all of their demonstrated interest activities. And again, don't go crazy. You don't have to do them all. The easy stuff they can do right now for demonstrated interest is also stuff they should be doing anyway. So that's like open their emails, right? Remember they can see whether or not students open the emails. But also in opening those emails, they may find things. They might find their portal logins. They might find invitations for interviews. They might find invitations for other events where they can further demonstrate interest or learn more about the school. And guess what? Even those admissions decisions and financial aid letters they're going to be in the portal, but you'll get a notification via email. So they should be opening their college emails anyway. Another thing they can do that's a really low hanging fruit in terms of demonstrated interest right now is social media. They can follow the colleges on whatever social media platforms the students are on. It's a good place to get information. It's usually the first place they're going to post, okay, we're going to release our decisions on such and such a day. So that's sort of a good way for students to keep in touch with what the timelines are for their schools. Students have clicked submit on their early action and early decision applications, but they may not have finished all their other applications. And I cannot urge you strongly enough to do that. I know it is hard after that first round of submissions. Kids are burned out. It's hard to keep the energy up. School is demanding. It's busy at school with all the other activities they're doing. I can't state it strongly enough how important it is that they finish all those applications before those early decision schools in particular start coming back with notifications. So especially if the student is waiting for a kind of high stakes early decision, what parents will say all the time is, why should we do all these applications? Why should we spend all this time and pay these application fees if we might not need it? Well, you don't have to pay the application fees. You don't have to submit the applications, but you should finish them. And the reason is that if you get bad news on December 15th, which is about when a lot of the early decision notifications come out, I'm going to talk about that more in a minute. The last thing that student is going to want to do is write a bunch of upbeat essays about how excited they are about schools they never thought they'd have to think about. It is really, really it's a tough blow if kids don't get into their early decision schools, no matter how much they say, I know it's a long shot. I know I probably won't get in. One of the qualities of early decision is that you kind of have to emotionally invest, right? You kind of have to be all in emotionally. So even though in their rational brains, kids are like, this might not happen, they've really invested emotionally. So if they don't get in, it's very often really, really a setback. I mean, sometimes I've had kids like not get out of bed for 3 days. Don't worry, they'll be fine. They just have to grieve and move on. But what you don't want is while they're grieving to have to write all these other applications. You may want to start thinking about whether you might need any additional campus visits, with the exception of early decision that's binding and you have to commit, pretty soon after you get the acceptance. Most schools, you go all the way to May 1st before you have to make a decision. So that means that in February, March, April, you can visit campuses if you need to. And then the final thing I would say that students can still do is any kind of additional reaching out. So for example, sometimes athletes, usually this is more of a D3 kind of situation where athletes can sort of reach out to coaches and fill out their recruiting forms on websites while they're applying or after they're applying, can actually just email coaches and talk to them. I have a student who just very at the last minute decided to she wants to run in college, and lo and behold, there's some coaches who are super, super excited to talk to her. One of them kept her on the phone for 90 minutes. And this is a really competitive institution, and she was shocked. She said, "He was just hard selling me on the school for 90 minutes." So, that's an example of sort of an interview that was really a sales pitch. So just if there's any additional reaching out that students need to do, following up on portfolio submissions for artists, anything else that's important to a student on the campus. So it's not over yet after you click submit.